I do, is I try it out. I get a piece of papyrus and I write on it with a reed pen, the way a Roman slave would have done. And I get a piece of parchment and write on it with a quill. And compare the experience of the two. And because we know, for example, that you could order books in ancient Rome and you could expect to pick up the final version a few weeks later. It was quick. Whereas we know from contracts about medieval books, if you ordered it this year, you may get it next year, if you're lucky.
Yes.
And on top of that, there was the cost difference. So
what's like modern graphic time?
Yeah. Well, the Romans had this huge book industry, and a small book, basically something like a little paperback, was cheap enough for you to buy and give to somebody as a little present. We know this from the documents.
Yes, some guy asked when it will be available, the documentary.
Oh,
Probably
yes, that's the question. Corona has changed the broadcasting time. So I think the thing is, I promise to put it on my Instagram. Just keep looking and I'll let you know for each country when it comes out.
Seguite Brody su Instagram all'indirizzo @Brody Neuenschwander per sapere le date di uscita, perché il coronavirus purtroppo ha rallentato in maniera abbastanza importante i giochi, ecco, diciamo un po' così. You are famous for your works, so explosive, so crazy, so full of personality, okay? And how do you start for making a composition, for example?
How do I start? That's a good question. I would have to ask Tess the answer. Tess is my muse. I look at a sheet of paper and I think it shouldn't be white, that sheet of paper. It should be something else. I go back a little bit. When I was a student at Roehampton, one of the things we were being taught to make compositions with complicated or rather, difficult compositions. And I would watch the people rule their sheets of paper and then become so nervous that they would mess it up. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start, and problems will happen, and then I will fix them. And I'm not going to be afraid of them because they give you the chance to come up with a new idea. Now that works for some things. It obviously doesn't work for everything. But I think the thing is, I have an impulse to make a shape, and I'll start, and the one shape leads to the next shape. I don't go looking for poems or anything by other authors. I just, whatever word jumps into my head at that moment, that's the word I start with. By the time the first word is on the paper, I have the second word is ready. By the time that's there, maybe I have a sentence, and maybe it changes as I go. So it's a spontaneous literary process. I invent the words. There are no mistakes because I decide. And it also means that the whole sentence needs to be finished when the composition is finished. So I have to finish two things at once, the composition on the page and the language. And that's the trick usually, to get it all to work out. But I like the risk that involves, that you can work for several hours and then still totally mess it up.
And about you, before you talk about the full puzzle that it's composed by tools, paper, ink, and so on. These things also is part of your process of composition, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
The flowing that you have with the words and the shapes is to the flow of these components. Is it possible?
Well, yeah, I think the mood would dictate the choice of a certain pen, and from there, as I said before, certain shapes would flow. But it's amazing, even if I try to do the same thing again, it never is.